mosquito protection.
We are live, Kahlil. Good connectivity today, only good connectivity. Welcome, my Cafecito friends. Thank you for being my extrovert therapist as we get through this COVID-19 pandemic. And we have over 100 episodes now of Café Colón, and we're glad you're with us today. Thank you for joining us. We've got a tremendous voice of Albuquerque with a smile to match. He's a tremendous human being. So glad he agreed to come on Cafecito con Colón, Kahlil Ekulona. And we're going to have a great time together. We'll get through some links, and then we'll bring you live Ekulona right here on Cafecito con Colón. So thanks for coming by. Good morning, Dr. Roy Ball. Glad you're with us. Shannon, you never miss. You and Dr. Roy Ball are two of my faves. Thanks for being here on Cafecito con Colón. Friday, 9 a.m. right here, right before the heat wave hits Albuquerque. We're going to have record highs this week, Saturday and Sunday, scheduled to hit like 104, 105 degrees. You'll be glad you're not from where Kahlil is, where he had to suffer through that heat and humidity. New Mexico, we don't have any humidity. Elephant Butte doesn't give us much, so we don't have humidity here. So we are blessed.
That's right.
Kahlil, you know that humidity, don't you?
Oh yeah, man. It's almost like debilitating, you know? Growing up as a
Get out of
kid,
the shower, you dry off, and you're wet again.
you're wet again. I interned in DC in 1994, and all the time I would have to get dressed in front of my open refrigerator and freezer doors. Yeah.
Now that's a sight. That's a sight, folks. You thought about it here this morning on Cafecito con Colón. Kahlil getting dressed in front of his open refrigerator in Washington, D.C. in 1995. He's come a long way, baby.
Yes, indeed.
You got some heat on the Mason-Dixon line too, don't you?
Yeah. That's where I grew up pretty much. Literally on the Mason-Dixon line. Very interesting.
We're going to talk about that a little bit.
All right.
Good morning, Dr. Lang. Aaron Monfilano. So glad you're here, Aaron. I sent you that note that I've been missing you. It's good to see you this morning, even just on Facebook Live.
Aaron, hi.
Carlos Contreras coming out to see Kahlil this morning. John Moore, I'm glad you got some hot coffee ready to go. And John, I think I owe you a phone call. I got that message on that antique in my house. It's known as a, what do they call those? They used to have a little round thing on them and it had numbers on it. You know what they are, right, Kahlil?
Yeah, the telephone? The old
yes,
school?
it was home telephone, the landline. John Moore called and left a voicemail on my landline. And I remember growing up, the little micro cassette that had the recorder on it. People would leave reservations to go set up at my parents' flea market in Bosque Farms, New Mexico, down in Valencia County. So John, I'll be calling you today. Thank you so much. Dr. McCaffrey, thank you for joining us. You're about to get schooled because Kahlil Ekulona is just an amazing human being with an incredible lived experience. He looks through a complicated lens. We're going to have some difficult dialogue this morning. He's going to help us better understand what that lived experience has been for him. And we are so honored to have him on this morning. Let's see here. Good morning, Selena. Glad you're with us. Let me get right away to our links, 9:05. And let me start out with, of course, an update on our COVID-19 statistics here in New Mexico, thanks to the New Mexico Political Report, always doing a tremendous breakdown. We had record highs in Doña Ana County. They saw their highest day yesterday with 253 positive COVID-19 cases, the fifth day straight just of over 200 cases a day in New Mexico. And let me just be more clear, I'm sorry that 85 cases. The overall cases for New Mexico is 253. Kahlil's done a great job of covering some of the not just the specifics on the numbers for COVID-19, but on his Your Government New Mexico at KUNM. He's done some great analysis and thought about the residual impact that COVID-19 has had on our communities, particularly our impoverished communities, what that's done for the education landscape. You know that I've posted a couple of those links here on Cafecito con Colon over time. I'm going to give you his landing page for that podcast. If I am reading things correctly and understanding correctly, I'm not sure that he's going to be doing that any longer. We'll ask him about. Kahlil, are you still going to be doing your government in New Mexico? I got the idea that you might be not doing the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or something like that. You're changing it up?
We are reformatting and retooling the show. It will have a new name, and it will be on Sundays, an hour-long episode. I'm not sure if it's going to be weekly or bi-weekly. I'm not sure about that, but get ready for Sundays, afternoon, evenings, hour-long episodes.
Okay, gotcha. I knew there was a change up coming. I just didn't know exactly what it was. And folks, you've now heard the voice of Kahlil Ekulona, and now you know why I'm a little intimidated. This guy has not just got a face for TV; he's got a voice for radio. He brings it, and so here I am, little old me, hosting the master, the producer, the record label executive, the writer, the MC, the performer, the amazing friend of Pope. Yes, all. Kahlil Ekulona. We're so glad you're here, Kahlil. I'm going to post a couple more links up before we toss it over to you for a good visit. There's some important things going on.
I'm really excited.
I'm really excited to have you here, but also a little nervous with you, man. You're the pro. Okay, here. So I want to give a shout out to Senator Michael Padilla. I want to give a shout out to his stakeholders that helped him advance legislation to change the cliff in New Mexico that foster children experienced when they turned 18. You know, I've provided guidance and support to my beautiful son, who I love so, Rafael. He's now pushing 23 years old. From the time he's 18 to 22, we were every step of the way. Unfortunately, our foster children at the tender age of 18 found themselves at a cliff. And that was that they lost government services. They lost that government support. They lost that transitional energy that we all need for success when we're a mere 18 years old. I know I buried my father. I was an island unto myself when I was a teenager. Not a single family member in the state of New Mexico was here. Community stepped up and filled the gap for me, and I'm grateful for it. And I broke the cycle of poverty as a result. But I can tell you that the legislation that Michael Padilla advanced to change that cliff and to advance those services through the age of 21 for those foster children is a game changer for many, many lives in New Mexico. So congratulations and shout out to Mike. Michael Padilla, good job. Good morning, Anik. Thank you for joining us again this morning. Good to see you this morning. Hey, maybe Kahlil's going to submit something here. NPR is calling for people to submit their writings, and I know he can write, I know he can rap, I know he can do all kinds of things, and so can you. So think about if you are in a position to submit to NPR, being Black in America today, sharing your lived experience. They've got an open call here, and just as though we've had for the last almost 7 weeks, I think we're going on 6 or 7 weeks now of having lifting up Black voices on Cafecito con Colon. Without exception, every day, Cafecito has been a Black voice that has made me a better man for listening, for hearing, so that I can know better, be better, and do better. And I hope that you've all had the same experience I've had on this journey. But you can share your experience with NPR for that submission. And today, July the 7th, is Blackout Day. Blackout Day. Now, Blackout Day is not a day when we all sit home and we protest and not engage in consumer activity, but we are deliberate and intentional about supporting our Black businesses in New Mexico and around the country. So this is a Blackout Day economic protest. It encourages shoppers to buy only from Black-owned businesses like our incredible Michael Silva over there at Rude Boy. And we've posted the Black businesses on Cafecito before. I need to try and find that list and post it up today. If I was better prepared, I'd have done that. I apologize, I missed it. But find your Black businesses here in Albuquerque, whether it be, what's our little, we have our wonderful locally owned, they make the best chicken and waffles right here. They got two. Yes, thank you, Kahlil. You can co-host any day you want. You're perfect. You're like a mind reader. So right here, we got Kahlil doing magic. He's reading my mind. Yes, Nexus. Go have lunch at Nexus today. or over at Frank's Chicken and Waffles. I apologize, Frank's Chicken and Waffles. They're pretty good too. Pretty good too. So there's another good Black business. But support Black businesses today. I'm going to find a place to do that with today for lunch. Let's see here. A couple more links, and then we're going to get to our guest. It is 9/11, and we are cranking it out. Vintage Albuquerque this year is going to be supporting Keshet. So take a look at that. That's, of course, in July. It'll be a much different format. It'll be virtual, but it's going to be benefiting another phenomenal nonprofit in our community that changes children's lives. And what I love most about Keshet is that they have been very intentional about reaching out to communities of color and engaging those students with disabilities. I think the first time I saw a stage presentation with a young woman in a wheelchair was a Keshet performance. They are so phenomenal at what they do. Thank you for making our community better, Keshet. So check out Vintage Albuquerque this year. The online auction starts in 1 week, folks. So get ready. I already told you we're going to be cranking it out in the heat department here in Albuquerque. It is going to be hot, so hot. And there's your Albuquerque Journal story talking about the heat wave coming to Albuquerque. The other story, if you are a subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal, you saw this very powerful photo above the fold of an incredible, just an incredible Mexican doing a difference. We've talked a lot about marginalized communities actually going from being invisible to being seen. And there's not a more marginalized community than our Native American women being invisible. And this task force member has personally a lived experience where she survived sexual assault. She lost family members to violence, and she is now making a difference. It's a long piece. I encourage you to read it. It's very, very powerful. There is the link to that. So let's get to our guest. It is exactly 9:13. We are going to get ready to go here. Let me give you a couple of Kahlil's links here, particularly to the YNMG, Your Government New Mexico, which is changing in format. Probably he's on Sundays, which good luck, Kahlil. I am not on Sundays because the bandwidth is taken up by our faith-based community, and I could not get a good feed on Sundays. So good luck with that. But will you record and then post up? How will you do that?
We'll record and post up, and they'll also air on KUNM.
Well, KUNM does it right, man. They've got all nice equipment. I'm just here in my humble home trying to make a difference. But thank you. So there's Kahlil's landing page there at KUNM. I also want to encourage you, when you've got some time, to take a look at a great podcast, video podcast, or vlog, or something of that nature, whatever you want, put on by OLOD Records. A tremendous conversation with four beautiful people. Kahlil was the dean in the room, so to speak, at the tender age of 47. He was the elder. Tremendous three young people who just opened up their hearts and shared their experience. And I encourage you to check out that YouTube link that I posted up. More specifically, to Kahlil, this great performance with DJ Flo Vader and Pope Yes Yes Y'all. We can talk a little bit about that this morning, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity. This is a little performance that he did about a year ago or so on KOB on his Good Morning or Good New Mexico, Good Day New Mexico. Do you remember that, Kahlil?
Oh yeah. Right. Those were fun times.
Fun times. Well, check that out. Don't miss that. It's 2.5 minutes long, and you will be enriched by watching it. Oh, and let me not, if I get another text message about why I haven't put this up yet, and I want to say thank you to Laryl and his team. I give a birthday shout out to Abigail Sanchez and my dear friend Roberta Ritchie. I don't know if she's on this morning. She joins us almost every morning. It's her birthday today, so feliz cumpleaños to both of them, my dear friends. But here's the link that I want to post up so people stop asking why I haven't. But yes, Team Chisholm and Brian's Angels were prominent in our work where we delivered care packages that were not just filled with food and essential items, but in fact, they were packed with love. And we delivered care packages and restored people's faith in humanity. And it was a beautiful thing to thousands of New Mexicans in about 14 different counties. And Laurel and his team did a beautiful job featuring my dear Rosella Aaron Chisholm and the work that we did with our care package program. So there's the digital edition of the July fantastic Albuquerque, the magazine. You can find us on page 156. So check us out. I always look nice when I'm standing next to Erin, and she's got her boxes of ramen noodles. We delivered thousands of ramen noodles, thousands of granola bars, Clorox. I mean, what a great, I'm a better man for having done that program with Rosella Aaron Chisholm. Thank you for your love and for your faith that we could do it. Thanks to all our donors that stepped up and helped with that. It was a beautiful thing. So let's get to our producer, record label, executive writer, MC, and incredible performer, and a change agent in Albuquerque. I got to tell you, this is the first time, I think, in all the incredible African-American Black leaders that we have brought on Cafecito con Colon over the last 5 or 6 weeks, maybe 7 weeks now. I'm losing track. But since the murder of George Floyd, I cleared the deck. I canceled all our engagements and said, I'm only bringing Black voices on Cafecito con Colon. And I will admit that when I made that decision, I certainly didn't expect it, that I would be doing this for 2 months. But I have to do what I can, regardless of all the emails, regardless of the little snippy, salty posts that I get about, there's a lot more going on than just Black Lives Matter. I will continue to do this because, as I said, from that day after the murder of George Floyd, I am optimistic, hopeful, and prayerful that this won't be a flash in the pan, that this won't be a flashpoint, but instead a tipping point. And because of voices like Kahlil's and people around the globe, this is not a flashpoint. It is a tipping point. We are all learning more. We are all learning how to be better, how to be better allies, how to better understand the lived experience of Blacks for the last 400 plus years. And what we thought was not there is absolutely there. It is the ugly underbelly of the exhausting lived experience of Black women and men in New Mexico. And that's what's been so heartbreaking, because we talk about the beautiful tapestry of New Mexico. And yes, we are a multicultural state, which gives us an opportunity to lead in this conversation, but it doesn't give us the right to ignore the fact that we have issues here that we have failed to confront. And we are doing that now. And I hope you will continue to join me on this journey of trying to know better so we can do better and be better human beings. Be better human beings. And Kahlil hits that message home every time he speaks, whether it was when he was facilitating the governor's listening session, or whether it was on the podcast that I talk about. He is so good at framing that and so powerful. And it's not just his mellifluous voice and his $1 million smile. It is the heart that he brings to the conversation every time I've heard him speak. This is the very first time of all these sessions that I'm really bringing somebody to camera and to Cafecito that I don't have a relationship with. Everyone that has been on my Cafecito has been somebody who I have a relationship with. And Chad and a couple others making fun of me, saying they needed to tune into Brian Colon's Cafecito because they need to find their Black community, and I happen to know where they all are. And that has been the highest compliment. And so many people have posted up, like, not Marjorie. No, Marjorie was the one that said it. Marjorie, good morning. She says I'm her compadre, not just an ally. But Marjorie said I introduced her to her Black community, that I've had all these relationships and I've been hiding them. And now I brought them to the forefront. And I've been blessed by those relationships. It's made me the man I am. And people like Kahlil, who I haven't had a relationship with, but now I'm building one this morning, are going to make me an even better man. So Kahlil, producer, record label, executive writer, MC, performer, change agent, voice of KUNM, and just a phenomenal leader and thinker. Bring it to us this morning. Good morning. Welcome to Cafecito con Colon.
Good morning, Brian. Thank you very much for having me, my friend. And thank you for the very kind words. I really appreciate it.
Well, I meant every one of them. And Kahlil, I want you to give us a little bit of the backdrop that creates the lens you look through. I talk about that all the time. The lens we look through matters. And yours is very complicated. I know that, having listened to many of your presentations, I know that you grew up literally on the Mason-Dixon line. That's where your parents raised you. It's where they started adjusting that lens that we talk about. Tell us a little bit about that, and then your journey back east and up to New York, and where a lot of my family's from, all those New Yorkers there in the Bronx, and then now to New Mexico a couple times. One, I think, in the late 90s or 95, 97, and then now you've been back. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, I was fortunate in my parents. My parents took my siblings and I, when it came to understanding our view of ourselves in the world. My father specifically, really taught us things within the African tradition, which is not solely belongs to the African tradition, but the main model was do nothing to bring shame to your family. And within that, they began to tell us about ourselves and our family history and our people's history. And it was interesting growing up. My last name was not always Ekulona. It was changed when I was 8 years old in the second grade. And going to my father, I remember my dad calls me in. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, you can choose your first name. This is what our last names are going to be. Your now first name will then become your middle name. And I chose Ajamu, and Ekulona was our last name. And I'm outside with my friends, and they're saying, well, why did you all change your names? And I'm like, it's a part of our African tradition to understand our heritage. And my friends, my African-American friends, when I'm in second grade, started calling me African Bush Boogie. And I said, I don't understand. Your family, your ancestry is from Africa too. And their response was, no, they weren't. No, they're not. And at 8 years old, I understood what my parents were doing for us. My parents taught us that you're not necessarily Black Americans as far as the definition that America is going to give to you. Your line started way before the first of your ancestors were brought here in chains. Way before that. So they taught us to identify ourselves as a human in the world, as a human of African descent second, as a human of African descent who happens to live in the United States of America third. So within that, it was not only an incredible source of pride and understanding of who we were, but it allowed us, none of us really came up with that definition to where we were burdened by the remnants of Jim Crow. I was born in 1973. We were not burdened by the remnants of Jim Crow in our minds, in how we were able to develop ourselves. Our parents encouraged that. They also encouraged us, well, they demanded that, they supplemented our education. We would come home from school and they, what did you learn? And we would break it down. And if you weren't able to impress them with your recitation of what you learned, you had additional work off of whatever the school gave you. And within that, they told us certain facts and things of these are where the history books get it wrong. And they also taught us about people. It's just a confluence of things. Like where I grew up in Owings Mills, Maryland, is pretty much on the Mason-Dixon line that separated the North and the South in the Civil War. But the neighborhood I grew up in was an international neighborhood. A lot of families who were brand new to the United States, who moved to Baltimore and to Maryland, moved into my neighborhood. So we had a bit of everyone. And I've had those experiences throughout life to where it wasn't much for me to come up to somebody and to say, I have hung out with people who I pretty much figure are Trump supporters in Indiana. I've hung out in the deep hood in Los Angeles. Just being able to be around many different types of people, my parents really gave that understanding and that ability to us. Therefore, I got to see humanity for what it is, rather than separating through economic, socioeconomic, or ethnic groups.
So that context included not just the historical perspective, but a context of the greater humanity.
Yeah.
that so many of us fail to embrace. Interestingly enough, I talked about restoring people's faith in humanity, and it's something that we don't contemplate very often. And there are a lot of people that don't get to experience the humanity that we should all be able to enjoy because of the marginalization that goes on, particularly in our communities of color.
Yeah. Well, and with each other. That's the thing. We're not really taught in this society to honor humanity. You know, we don't. We're not taught that. And because we're taught, I mean, whatever about America and American exceptionalism, we don't allow ourselves to become a part of the world. For most Americans, their introduction to the rest of the world was 9/11. When events that happened, violent events that happened across the world, happened here at home. And that was some of my international friends would say that. Welcome to what happens in the rest of the world. We still don't view ourselves in that way. I remember growing up, so many people, and it just seems so strange to me. They're like, oh my God, the world is this and that. And I'm like, no, it's not. That's what's happening here in the United States. But we're taught to think that this is the only place that matters. The things that happen here are the only things that matter, that are of value to humanity. So of course we're not. It's hard for people to get that, and people are making that understanding and growing to that understanding now through COVID and, with the result of George Floyd.
I think that's exactly right. And I think that is partially what makes this different, is because we've all had an opportunity to take a deep breath in isolation with our families and stop and just listen during the front end of the COVID pandemic. And then with the George Floyd murder, and that's what hopefully will make sure that this is a tipping point. I will say that I still believe that what you're saying is true. Even in this time, we're getting better. But I want to know, how many people know that right now Brazil and India are on fire with COVID-19. We're number one, and they're in I think number 2 and 3 in the world for the prevalence of COVID-19. But I think in some ways, we got 253 new cases here in New Mexico, and most people don't even know that number. They know how many people in their family have it or in their little bubble. So hopefully conversations like this take us out of that bubble, help us understand the lived experience of the broader population that we should all be caring about. And that broader population is simply humanity.
It completely is. It completely is. I mean, Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil, is going in repeatedly for testing because he's had a fever, and he has a lot of behaviors like our president. He's taken on that platform as a way to win, and he won. And now he's also been kind of disregarding the threat of COVID-19. And now we see, like you said, the numbers have sparked up, but now he's under close, observation for what's going to happen with him.
He like somebody else we know here in America, he's still not adjusting his behavior completely. I guess yesterday or day before, he did another public event while he was symptomatic, not asymptomatic, but symptomatic. And I guess some of the handlers were saying, hey, don't, not too close and blah, blah, but they're still minimizing, whether it's Bolsonaro or whether it's Duarte in the Philippines, the leadership, in auditing, we talk about the tone at the top in organizations and whether or not that exposes risk and fraud opportunities and potential. And when I think about those kinds of leaders that have minimized the gravity of the situation we're in, I can only imagine the exponential impact that's had on the spread of COVID-19. But let's just take that and maybe segue on the same thought, which is our failure at the top, me included, as an elected official who got 500,000 votes to get to serve this beautiful state and live my dream. We, for far too long, for 7 years of the Black Lives Matter movement, for far too long, we didn't put the spotlight on the issue. And that brings us to today. We didn't express the gravity of the situation that our people of color were in all around the country, including New Mexico. And so shame on us. But let's not embrace guilt. Let's embrace action to 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 change and to know better and to be better, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing on a daily basis. And you know, we've had some great guests on here, including Ron yesterday, who was very generous to talk about my journey in the Black community, and always having shown up. But I did it in my own way, but I didn't necessarily spread the message. I was present, but that doesn't necessarily qualify me as having been the best advocate I can be and the best ally I can be. So talk to us, Kahlil, about kind of that structural oppression that you've spoken about in the past so eloquently, that has led us to where we are now, that has allowed us to basically in many ways ignore this conversation and allow that community to be so invisible in spite of 7 years of trying to be heard.
Well, to kind of combine that in a segue with what you're saying about, we're talking about President Bolsonaro, President Trump, and the lack of action in New Mexico when it comes to looking at these ethnic and racial inequalities. Well, to paraphrase Rick James from the Dave Chappelle show, pride, like cocaine, is a hell of a drug. And pride will paralyze people. When I first came out to New Mexico, it was in 1996, about 8 months. I graduated college in spring of 1995, came out to 96 to kind of find myself. And I really enjoyed Albuquerque. Wasn't a lot of African Americans here, just a handful that I knew. And I spent close to a year before I went off to LA on my journey, and I've come back around. In coming back around in 2009, one of the things people would say to me as a selling point was, come here, we're so multicultural, stay here, isn't it cool? We're so tolerant. And I backed up and I said, that's not really the word you want to use, tolerance. You tolerate things which you can't stand. You tolerate that which annoys you. It's over there, it's not bothering you, and you just keep it over there in its place. Tolerance is a very different word than acceptance, than appreciation. And so, you know, I think that what's been happening in this, people call it the Black Lives Matter movement, and that's just the face. That's the name. This is about equality across the board for humans. The reason why it's called Black Lives Matter movement, well, specifically when you talk about racial equality, most people across the globe are going to think of the racial plight of African Americans here in the United States. Why? Well, it's the most powerful country in the world for at least the last 100 years going on. And we're the ones who've received the brunt of the racism, you know? Not to say that we don't own it. Everybody gets it. But that's why you see it happening across the world. That's why you see people of color in Canada, in Europe, in other places coming out and saying, hey, this is not only an American problem, we have these problems as well. So when thinking about that and seeing this human thing, and the way I try to paint it to people, because people want to go specifically and talk solely about racism and racism with African Americans. And so I understand when people coming to you in your emails and posts about, hey, there's more going on. Yes, this includes all of it. If you are about Me Too and the equal treatment of women, you're about this. If you are about LGBTQ and the equal treatment of people who want to live like that, then you are about this. If you are about immigration rights and taking care of refugees, you are about this. If you are about equality in the economy, you are about this. This is all the same thing. It is called Black Lives Matter because once again, it's going back to recognize humanity. And it's very interesting, Brian, like seeing all this happen, seeing things calm down a little bit, you know, at least here in New Mexico. Just talking to folks, and it seems like people have an existential human choice to make. Either you're about equality for all humans or you're not. It's quite simple. It's quite simple. You're about equality for all humans or you are not. We will allow people to come to that understanding and judgment on their own.
No, I think that's right. And one of the things we talked a little bit about that, but particularly in the space of the intersectionality that exists for people of color who also fall into those exact same categories that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Whether it's the story I posted this morning about Native American women being invisible and having to suffer through rape and violence and domestic issues that have not been able to find a space or a place of safety. But that intersectionality exists, whether it's in the LGBTQ plus community, for Black men or women who we've had on, individuals on this show who experience and live that intersectionality. It's out there and it matters.
Yeah, because COVID doesn't care what you are. COVID don't care if you're Republican, if you're a Democrat. COVID don't care if you're queer, if you're cisgender. The COVID don't care. It does not care, and that's not. And that's what this should be about. It's like, this is about human beings all over the world sitting down and hopefully questioning their humanity. Looking at it.
I think that's right. And you've just done a good job bringing that conversation to the forefront in a very, very powerful way. Tell me about I think the only way we can grow is kind of like when you work out. Not that I work out, as you can tell, but my understanding is my understanding is that when you work out, you got to have the pain, right, to have growth. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So maybe bring us some pain, because I think we far too often talk about that multicultural tapestry that is New Mexico. We don't talk about some of that underlying dialogue that exists between, frankly, northern New Mexico and southern New Mexico. When you have people in southern New Mexico, and I campaigned and have lived in Las Cruces for a decade, so I'm familiar with that community very, very well. I've been to the colonias. I've advocated for the people living in the conditions down there, particularly in the late 80s, early 90s. It was so painful to see people drinking their refuse water, just brutal conditions. And those people very much identifying with Mexico. And then some of my deepest relationships come from northern New Mexico, and I spend a lot of time up there. It's one of my favorite parts of the state. But you talk to those folks up there, and they are descendants of royalty. They are of Spain, and you learn very quickly to be careful about how you speak about that heritage. And I don't mind celebrating that heritage, but I wonder if we're not honest with ourselves about how infrequently we find that acceptance and appreciation, as opposed to tolerance, for those coming from Mexico versus those coming from the King of Spain or from Spain. And we don't talk about that very often in public, but maybe you can tell us about your lived experience as a Black man who's kind of out there in front, whether it's because you're hanging out with the Pope, yes, all. Yes, y'all, or whether it's just because you are so prominently featured in our media. You are a media presence, much like Gene Grant, who also brings a phenomenal perspective and dialogue. And he's coming on. I've known Gene for 20 years, and his schedule is worse than mine. But we're going to get him on. But tell us about what that experience is for us, because I think we all have to be uncomfortable and experience some pain for that growth. And pain means that we have to have you be candid.
Well, you just said it right there, uncomfortability. Before the governor's open talk on racial inequity and racial justice that I had the honor of being the moderator for, I let everybody know this is going to be uncomfortable. Change doesn't come with being comfortable. And guess what, though? We're Americans. If you were born and raised here or been here for a considerable amount of time, you've been psychologically trained to function while being uncomfortable. You have been, because if that weren't the case, the mental health awareness would not be what it is. Right. So many people need it. Yes, because that is the society we live in. And that's the thing. People understand that they think if this is the most utopian society and this is the perfect way to live, just look at your lives and then ask yourselves, is that true? But to get to your point is, what do you think the Oñate statue shooting was all about? That had nothing to do with technically Black Lives Matter. That was about equality. That was about recognizing the past and history for what it is. I was just listening to the BBC World Service last night, and they were doing a spot about a town in England, Bristol, and how they had a statue of a man who was a great philanthropist to the town, helped the town flourish, but he was also a major actor in the slave trade. They took his statue down, threw it in the lake, and they pulled it up, and they're like, okay, we have to talk about this because these are things that people don't mention. We want to hide it. And I understand, like you said, people not wanting to air certain things in public, right? Don't air out the dirty laundry. In the African-American community, it's like, don't talk about these things in front of white people. That's only for us. I'm sure each little group has their things. But my quote about airing the dirty laundry is it eventually gets clean. When you air your dirty laundry, it gets clean. And maybe that is a part of our problem. Maybe we've all, within ourselves, within our families, within our community structures, have these marks that are not pretty, these blemishes that we don't like, and we try to hide and conceal them, or we try to dress them up so they look a certain way so we can purport ourselves as being woke, as being aware, as being more human. Well, actually, the best way you can be human is to admit where you effed up and change it. Admit where you effed up and changed it. Case in point, look at Germany. When the protests started going off across the world, Germany got out there in mass, one of the largest there have been. We understand Germany's history, and Germans understand their history because they didn't allow them to forget it. It wasn't like they had these monuments up and stuff. They were like, no, we're going to teach you about what happened, what really happened, and why this cannot happen again. Here in America, we love to talk about it, but we don't like to put any action behind it because it's easy. If I can talk about it well enough, I can get people to believe that, and then they'll spout that when they're at their barbecues, house parties, at the bar, when they're having Thanksgiving with their family, but I don't have to act upon it. And it shows kind of, I lived in Los Angeles, Hollywood for a long time. And a lot of people say, well, LA, everything looks so good. And I'm like, yeah, LA is not everything that it seems. Let's put a nice window dressing on it. Well, that's what we're doing here. And so, yes, you're going to be uncomfortable. I have plenty of friends here in town, some that are new within the past 11 years, me being back, some that I've met back in 96. I've got friends from kindergarten who I'm like, yo, I know you. I'm not going to call you a racist or a bigot, but these are some things to work out. I've known you most of my life, said person. But these are things you have to work out, and it's uncomfortable. And I can feel it when we're on the phone. This is like one of my best friends, and they're like, I don't know how to take this from my friend. And I'm like, I don't hate you. I love you. I see your humanity. But in this uncomfortability, how many times are people who are in romantic relationships have uncomfortable conversations and see where that leads their relationship as opposed to those who don't? You know? It's not as if we need to invent a new set of tools or a new set of operations to address this. We already do within our daily lives. The question is the desire. And I think the question also looks like people don't understand what it's going to look like after. Some folks are, well, if I understand this and we push for equality, am I going to have what I have now? Am I going to have the opportunities that I have now? What is this exactly going to look like? Well, here's the beauty of it. None of us know.
Right.
We can build it. We can make it look like something to our design. This is not in the hands of some mythical, monolithic, powerful agent. This is in our hands to decide. So what are we going to do about it?
I think that's well stated. Well stated. Since you've been back and you've come from LA and you've got that complicated lens, Mason-Dixon line out to the West Coast, back here to New Mexico a couple times, and now you planted yourself here and you're making a difference here. Help us better understand what the here is like for a Black man whose name is Kahlil Ekulona, that most people probably don't even take the time to try and pronounce correctly. And that's unfortunate. And I can tell you it's unfortunate from a guy who's normally pronounced Brian Colin. Imagine, that.
Oh yeah, I bet.
But tell us about that, because like I said, I really think that's important, because you didn't grow up here, so you don't have some of the protections and some of the comfort points that other women and men of color, Black women and men have, because they got some of those comfort points of having known others since they were a child here in New Mexico, and that may provide a source of comfort and support. But you're kind of outside coming in. You're a grown man, and you have to deal with the life you walked into. What has that been like?
It's been interesting. Like you said, people pronouncing my name. So many people call me Kahlil, and I'm like, it is Kahlil. It is incredibly easy to pronounce. But someone, doing TV and seeing all different sorts of names, it's like, I want to strive to get that right. I think that's one of the first points of not only ethnic recognition or people's heritage, but their humanity. Get their name right if you can. My experience here.
Yes, we're going to get it right here on Cafecito con Colon. That's Kahlil.
That's right. That's right. It's been interesting being out here. Like it's tough because once again, being where I'm from, having the experiences that I've had, you throw me in and I'm going to get down, and meet folks and see who they are. I haven't had, let's just say I've worked for several institutions that saw my abilities and talent as limited, where I brought certain ideas and was like, hey, I think, you like what's going on. This is what we can do to go along with your expressed mission statement to take it a little further. And the idea necessarily wasn't considered. I'm not going to say it was because I'm a Black man, but I've been around the block several times. I've had conversations, and when it came to actually considering something, I just don't think it was something that they were used to. A lot of people out here are like once again, back to comfort. They like safe, comfortable conversations, safe, comfortable individuals. I am a challenger, but I'm also a unifier. I'm also a bit of an iconoclast, incredibly eccentric, and I don't toe the company line all the time. Once again, I won't dishonor my family and I won't dishonor my company, but I'm going to be unusual and a little bit different about my presentation and what I say and how I do things. So that may scare some off. I worked for a school as a community member, substitute teacher. I taught an elective class and things. And every year they would do a Black History Month celebration, but every year it would be the same thing. And after a while, I'm like, what are you all going to do that's going to be different? You have a handful. And when I say a handful, I mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 African-American students in your entire school, and you're doing the same thing. So if a kid sees it as a freshman, by the time they're a senior, what are they to think?
Right.
When you throw the same books at them every year, what are they to think? Why don't you take it further? And it's almost a feeling like we're doing the bare minimum. Isn't that okay? That's that I've come into that several times out here. And you come into people who aren't used to dealing with African Americans, or think that African Americans are all the same. When I'm like, just like human beings, we're all incredibly different, because everybody is different. You expect to be some monolithic group who believes the same thing. Get out of here. We're human beings. There's 7 billion people on the planet right now. In recorded history, there's been 110 billion human lives. You think everybody thought the same? No, get out of here. Allow us to be our own individual star in the galaxy, that we call planet Earth. And so, but my experiences, I'll be frank, and my experiences where I've dealt with it the most and have had some of the most difficult conversations, and when it comes to dating, very difficult conversations I've had to have when it comes to terms of dating. It's because, this happens on all forms. I'm just talking about my experience. People begin to fetishize people who are of another ethnicity,
Wow.
You fetishize, you can feel fetishized a little bit. I've worked a lot of different jobs and in my life. And most recently, before I got into the foray, as I was doing broadcast TV and radio and whatnot, I was working as a bartender. It's a wonderful way to meet people. It's a wonderful way to really brush up on your interview skills. just by talking to folks and working as a bartender. I was fetishized quite often. You know, I don't know how many times I just love Black men. I just love this and that. And I hear that and I'm like, are you talking about me or are you talking about all of us? I'm presenting myself to you as an individual. Are you looking at me as one? And that's where I began to understand the colorism. We're talking about like northern New Mexico and southern New Mexico. The colorism that is in here, you know? And people not wanting to, people who are, maybe mixed, have some family who are Mexican, some family who they consider Spanish, people refusing. This is what would bug me out, Brian. I was kind of wild about that. Dated a young woman, we talked about things. People in a place, in a part of the country where people love to talk about their heritage, where their family is from. She only talked about her mother's Hispanic side and refused to say anything about her father's Mexican side. Mm. And I'm like, that's so, what? This place, everybody loves to say, and my great granduncle did this and stuff. And it's like, wow, that's wonderful. That's something that a lot of African Americans do not have the pleasure of saying. A lot of us can't go back 600 years because of what happened to our families, what happened to our ancestors and being twisted up. There's so many. My brother-in-law's on ancestry.com until 4 a.m. in Los Angeles, calling and texting me like, look what I'm finding out. And my father has been doing research for over 35 years and we're finding out more. That's wonderful. But I began to understand, I'm like, oh, I see this colorism issue in dating and seeing that. And, you know, I don't, my parents were always like, you can date anybody who you want as long as they're a good person. So I did that. I dated all women of all different types and what have you. But that's something that I saw out here. It's like, wow, okay. Am I being seen for me or am I just the flavor of the month? And what does that mean in terms of being seen out here in the community? Because at one point in time on television, on broadcast, as far as I know, on broadcast TV in the state of New Mexico, the only 3 Black men you would see, Gene Grant, myself, and Van Jones.
Yep.
Van Tate.
I think that's right. I think that's right. And you were on for 5 years on the morning show, right? You had that.
I was on and off. Yeah, I started as a fill-in host and kind of became like a co-host type of thing and stuff. So I was on and off for over 5 years and whatnot. But that's it. That's all you saw. And I think it was even less African-American women. And it's like, I know that there were qualified candidates who applied for these positions, you know? Definitely seeing who was put on. And I'm like, that's kind of sloppy and stuff. And they could get it a little bit better. But it kind of goes back to, I love New Mexico, but it kind of goes back to this ethos, like just okay is enough. And I have this saying when people ask me about things, I'm like, in New Mexico, New Mexico's A+, a lot of the times it's everywhere else is C.
So what do you mean by that?
Where they will accept it's good enough. There is almost like this goal. There's almost like this expectation or this goal or this standard of maintaining the status quo and mediocrity and not really pushing it. There are opportunities to take something that's homegrown and really good and wow, let's blow this up and let's take this everywhere, you know, to show people that New Mexico is more than just cops and Breaking Bad and very weird news that rivals Florida's weird news, you know? Let's show people this beauty and how wonderful it is. And there's almost like an active movement to suppress it. I'm like, well, why not? And so within that, people do things and they're like, this is amazing. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's good. Work on this or that. Because I come from other places. I understand what this, particularly in the creative world, I understand what the standard is out there in other places, you know? And you see certain talented visionary folks who are from here, like, I'm gonna go somewhere else, hone my craft and come back. I'm gonna go other places and to see what they do well and do best. And then I'm gonna bring it back. Because New Mexico has been isolated. The rest of the country, so many people in the country think you need a passport to get here, which is ridiculous.
Right.
Absolutely ridiculous. But a lot of people are also afraid to leave. When I was teaching at these high schools and working in time for college applications and where you applying? Well, I'm thinking about, no knock against UNM or NMSU, but I'm like, what other schools are there out there in the world for you to grow and to see something? And they were so afraid. At first, people tried to use the financial argument, and I'm like, you can get loans and things like that to help you out. Don't worry about that. And they're like, but in which I totally understand not wanting to leave their families. But it's like, okay, you can always come back home. You can always come back home, but a hesitance to leave. And a lot of people working in the bars and being in the social scene, a lot of people, particularly young people, thought it was a big major move, like you're moving to a whole different land to go to either Austin or Denver. And I'm like, that's a lateral move. Move somewhere to where your family can't drive to you within a day. Where if you're stuck in a situation, you have to figure it out on your own.
That's right.
Because that teaches you who you are,
Big time. And I know that you were able to bring that perspective to so many young people, and it'd be fun to have a reunion of students that were touched by Kahlil over at Amy Beale High School, a place that I'm very fond of, and their experiential learning and community engagement is really a beautiful model. And I know that you had an impact on a lot of students over there for a long period of time, I guess almost a full decade. Is that right? In fact, I feel like our paths crossed one time because I've done a lot of work and been to a lot of events at Amy Beale over time. And I feel like our paths did cross at one of those events.
Definitely. Yeah. It was a good, not quite a decade, but a good solid 5.5, 6 years. And I'll say this about my experience, because many of these people are 22, 23 now,
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of it is with almost all of them, I can say that I went from being an educator, mentor, to being their friend.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really beautiful thing, to being their friend, to where I've got several who don't hesitate in calling me up just to talk about life and the things that they're experiencing. Some of my, as you can tell, I can go off on a diatribe. And some of my diatribes that I hit them with when they were 14, 15, they're seeing play out now. And for them to calling up and like, you really opened my mind to this. I see it now. And that's been a beautiful, humbling experience at Amy Beale High School and at NACA, the Native American Community Academy. It was really wonderful because doing the governor's panel, one of the panelists was a young man who I taught 8th grade math to.
Right. Right.
And I'm like, you're 23 and you're up here on the governor's panel. Well done, kid. Well done.
That's right. Well, as we could spend so much time, because I think like I said, that complicated journey brings a lens to this space that is so insightful and helpful. And I appreciate you giving us an hour of your day and appreciate you investing in our community, investing and planting roots here in New Mexico and making a difference here. You really are. And anything I can do to support you on that journey, just know that I'm in your corner and that I'm always a text message, phone call away. Kahlil, we are no longer in that space of hearing of one another, but now we know one another, and I'm a better man for that.
That's right, as am I. Thank you very much. And I got to say that the community of New Mexico has given so much to me personally. It was a place that I first came fresh out of college, thinking that I was still going to go into politics, coming a place that allowed me to live and to breathe and to begin to understand life. I went out to the Acoma Pueblo and I had an experience that kind of changed the rest of my life when I saw a few things and heard about a few things out there. And in 2012, when I had appendicitis and almost died and I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, to see the community come to help me the way they did, I'm forever grateful for. And that's the beauty of what New Mexico does that a lot of other places in the country don't. If somebody is in trouble, circle the wagons and help them. Let's spread that with not only the rest of the country, but the rest of the world. Community right. Coming together to help each other. So it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for reaching out, and it's really good to see you. And let's continue to work together in the future. I'd love that.
Absolutely, we'll do that. Thank you, Kahlil, for joining us, Mr. Ekulona. We are so thrilled that you were able to share with us today. We're better people for it. We're trying to know better so that we can do better and be better. And I'm trying to be the best version of myself I was created to be, and you've just helped me get a little closer to that. And thank you for helping us embrace the love and humanity that will lift us all up. We talk about lift up New Mexico, and And we can lift all of one another up if we just embrace that love and humanity and make sure that those who have been invisible are no longer invisible. We see you, we hear you, we are finding a path to making sure that we can all be lifted up together. And thank you, Kahlil, for joining me to do that this morning. Reach out to people who are alone in isolation and remind them that we're thinking of them. Remind them that they are not in this alone, and that while they may be isolated, they are not alone. We see them, we hear them, we feel them. We feel their pain, we feel their sorrow for being disconnected, particularly our elderly, particularly those who are in poverty and trying to survive right now. Thank you for joining me on Cafecito con Colon. We look forward to the rest of the week. We've got great guests all week scheduled all the way out until next week. It's going to be great. We've got folks like Bev McMillan. We've got, I can't even remember everybody that's on, but it's going to be a great week. And you started us out strong, Kahlil. Thank you for that. And make it a beautiful day in New Mexico.
Yes, sir. You as well. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye. Call me anytime, my friend.
I will. Take care, Brian. Thank you, sir.
You betcha. Bye-bye now.